I travel for work and my employer allows me to spend up to $100 day on food. If I don't use it, I don't get to pocket the money. When traveling, I make sure to use the full $100 every day, so I'm eating very well. My wife is upset with me because I get to eat out for every meal at least 2 weeks a month. She says it isn't fair and I should just go to the grocery store and bring back food to my hotel. I've explained to her that it doesn't make sense since I don't get to keep the money if I don't use it. Every evening when I call her, she wants to know exactly what I ate. She can see the credit card statements reimbursed by employer, so she knows how much I spent. She'll see I spent $75 on dinner and start freaking out about how wasteful I am. I take her out for dinner at least 2 times a week when I'm in town, and she goes out several times a week with friends when I'm not in town. This whole thing just seems irrational, and it is really putting a strain on our relationship. I haven't gained any weight and am in great shape. I focus on quality of food much more than quantity. Most hotels have a small gym and / or a pool. I can't buy groceries or gift cards to bring home. It is against policy. I submit pictures of the receipts, so this wouldn't work. I track all my expenses and submit receipts for reimbursement weekly. I float the money for 7 days max. Usually I have around $3,000 to $4,000 in expenses per week, which we can make work without any issues since I pay for all my food, airfare, hotels, and car rentals myself. I collect an enormous amount of points and other perks. These points allow me to go on at least 2 vacations a year with my wife for next to nothing. We went to Spain early this year for 2 weeks and spent under $400 for the entire trip. Not using a company card is one of the best perks. Using a different credit card is not on the table. My wife and I have all our finances together. We both think it's important to be 100% transparent with money. We don't have any kids. She started a business selling Mary Kay a few years ago. She is working really hard to expand and find new customers. She likes the idea of being her own boss, and I try to do everything I can to support her. I'm rarely gone for 2 weeks at a time. Sometimes I'm gone for only 2 days. On average, a trip lasts 5 days and I go on 3 a month. A lot are saying Mary Kay is a pyramid scheme. I don't really know that much about the details of the business. I see a lot of women selling makeup, candles, and diet-related products, so I thought this was normal. We've put in around $50,000 over the past 2 years. Most of the money goes towards buying inventory and training seminars. I'll have to do some research to see what is going on. My day-to-day is anything but glamorous. I've spent more time in the airport than I even care to think about. Things go wrong often on the logistical side. My work can be very stressful, but I've gotten very good at managing the workload. My boss encourages us to use the full expense amount. He understands the stress involved traveling so much. He's actually working on increasing the amount to $140 day because of inflation. I have waited tables for the last 3 years. During my shift last night, a group of 4 women in their late 20s came in. They were a pleasure to have as customers. They ordered 4 of our house cocktails to start with and then went over the menu for their entrees. Then I was on my way back to their booth with the drinks on a tray. I walked by the back side and overheard one of them talking about how she was 14 weeks along. When I rounded back, they were talking about the same topic, and it was clear to me that she was pregnant. I figured her having 1 drink wasn't a big deal. They ordered their entrees and I went off to handle other tables. About 5 minutes later, they called me over again and asked for another round. At this point I started getting concerned, but I took the order and cheerfully said I'd be right back. This time, I went to the bartender and asked him to make one of them a virgin cocktail. He was confused, but since he's a good friend of mine, I told him to just trust me. A few cocktails later, hers strictly virgin, they started getting rowdy, and Mrs. Pregnant Woman was also getting into it. I figured that since she didn't notice, things were okay. The problem came when I took them their check, and they asked to split the bill at the register. When Mrs. Pregnant Woman got to the counter, I saw her cocktails were marked with virgin. My bartender had edited each in the system for inventory. It was too late for me to edit them back, so I just had her pay, hoping that she wouldn't look at the receipt. They all thanked me and left, leaving a generous tip in the process. They were talking in the parking lot for the next short while, presumably waiting for an Uber. Several minutes later, Mrs. Pregnant Woman came back and asked what "virgin" on the receipt meant. I fessed up that it meant non-alcoholic. She blank stared me for a few seconds and then asked if she had ordered a non-alcoholic cocktail. I said no, but told her that I assumed she wanted one seeing as she was pregnant. It was a lame lie and I'll admit it, but she looked me in the eye and asked me to return her part of the tip. I did so. Then she talked to my manager. My manager took me into her office and literally shrieked at me until hoarse. I stood my ground and told her that I'm not going to be responsible for FAS. She told me that she was taking me off the calendar until she decided what to do with me. She also informed me that I could get the restaurant in serious trouble for discrimination. And upon examination of my state's laws, she is correct. But when I talked to my mother and father about it tonight, they told me that they understood my position. The entire staff at the restaurant is against me and I think that I'm going to call in and tell my manager that I quit. But I still feel in the right here. My apartment complex didn't do traditional trick or treating on Halloween. Residents were advised to set out pre-packaged individual candy bags on their patios / front door areas if they wanted to participate, but the traditional knock on door, physically hand strangers candy was not permitted. So, Halloween comes and the kids are all dressed up and each building has a scheduled time where the kids go door to door. I ended up having to work late, so my neighbor offered to walk my kids around with hers at our building's scheduled time. About 45 minutes later, my kids came home with a small bucket of candy. 6 little goodie bags each from individual apartments that participated. Everything was fine. And my kids didn't say anything weird had happened. They were just excited to eat candy once they got home. The next day I took my kids to the park directly across from our apartment complex. My neighbor was there with her kids as well. The kids were playing and she took out one of those individual goodie bags with candy in it from her purse and started to loudly rummage in it. She ate several pieces of candy and my daughter eventually noticed. Ran up and asked if she could have a piece and my neighbor responded, "Nope, this is my tax candy. Remember that this was my reward for taking you trick or treating last night." I was a little weirded out by that statement and asked what she meant. She said that since she is the one who had to take the kids out, she took 5 bags from each of my kids as a tax. Her son then chimes in and said, "You only took 2 bags from us." She responded with, "But I'm your mom. I was doing OP a favor so they get a higher candy tax." I was thinking about how to respond when I noticed that she was holding a Starburst candy and decided to just smile and nod and go back to watching my kids. I let her continue to finish off the bag of candy and then said, "Hey, aren't you vegan? You know a lot of those candies are made with animal products, right?" I explained what gelatin was and how a lot of those candies are made with it. She was horrified, Googles it, and then told her kids that they were leaving. She said something about how she was going to be sick and stormed off. Now she's giving me dirty looks every time we see her and won't let her kids play if she shows up at the park and we are there. My husband thinks I'm an asshole cause I should have either not said anything about the gelatin or said something right away when I noticed. I don't think it's my job to tell a vegan what is and isn't vegan though, and she deserved it for stealing candy from little kids. When we got home from the park after the gelatin incident, I sat my kids down and asked why they didn't tell me that the neighbor took half of their candy. My oldest kid is 6 and my youngest kid is 4. 6-year-old explained that as they went door to door during their designated trick-or-treating time, she would have my 4-year-old grab 2 bags instead of 1 from each apartment for the majority of them. She explained it to my kids that they were grabbing extra bags for her to be handed over at the end as taxation. So either freaking way she was directly taking candy from my kids or taking candy from other kids through mine. As for the authenticity of her vegan sim, I may have exaggerated when I said super vegan when I first posted this. She claims to be vegan and is very in people's faces about the benefits, etc. It's 100% about the health side. She brags about veganism curing cancer, diabetes, even some mental health issues. I have never once heard her talk about the benefits for animals. She also sells herbal tea products, customized gym clothing, etc., so she totes a pretty big vegan lifestyle. If that makes sense. Now for the gelatin. She knows what gelatin is, she knows what it's made out of, She knows that there are obvious things that she can't eat. But she had no idea that a lot of candy specifically had gelatin apparently. When I told her that they had gelatin in it, she knew what gelatin was but Googled the candies to see if I was correct. I think she is either really dumb or she eats non-vegan stuff all the time when no one's watching, and had to pretend to be horrified about it at this point. 'Cause a lot of you guys have pointed out that you literally can't be vegan and not know these things. I'm not vegan, I'm not even freaking vegetarian, and I know these things. I bought a house a few months ago and moved in last month. The previous owner was a friendly old man that could no longer live alone, so he decided to sell and move in with his daughter. Just to be clear now, apparently he had been allowing use of his driveway to his disabled neighbor lady largely because street parking is extremely limited, and what little street parking there is pretty much instantly occupied. What I am saying is unless you have a driveway you end up having to park a good 5-minute walk away, and that's the best case scenario. I put disabled in quotation marks because the lady in question is just really overweight, and I am not sure if that counts as disabled. Obviously I was unaware of this, so I was surprised to see a large SUV parked in my driveway when I moved in. I ended up having to knock on several doors asking whose car it was because the movers could not stand still on the busy road too long. I figured out it was the neighbor's car, so after a good 10 minutes of knocking, an extremely angry enormous lady opened the door. I told her to move the car and she immediately started arguing that the neighbor said it was fine. I told her he moved out. I moved in and no, it is not fine, and to move it because the movers need to unload my stuff. She begrudgingly did. I ended up seeing her walking back half an hour later completely wet with sweat. Now a few days later I went back to work and lo and behold, the SUV is parked in my driveway again. I go over there again, spend 20 minutes knocking on the door before this lady opens the door, again, visibly angry. I tell her to move her car. My driveway is not public parking. She protests, saying her ankles can't take walking the distance and claims I can easily walk. I tell her that while that might be true, it's my goddamn driveway and I want to park there myself. Again she moves her car. Again I spot her half an hour later drenched in sweat making her way home. Well, it happened again a week ago, and this time she would not open her door. I got tired of it and had her SUV towed. She of course came to my house to scream at me. I told her to get the hell off my property. A few days later I had a small fence installed with a lock on it to make sure it did not happen again. I have since been getting dirty looks from her and one other neighbor, and when I told my mom she told me I should be nicer to people. I do feel sort of bad too. She clearly struggles with the walk after all.